We've talked about board members and committee members and their responsibilities. Let's talk about the meetings themselves. First of all, should they be open?
It would be difficult to argue in favor of closed meetings. There's a widely held belief that open meetings and greater transparency in general promote more accountability.
Yes, that is becoming the norm now. Even city councils have to have open public meetings now. Why shouldn't professional regulatory bodies do? In addition, we just make better decisions when we know that somebody's watching us.
What about if someone actually uses that venue to grandstand or make their own point?
Well, experience has shown that although grandstanding may happen in the initial transition from closed to open meetings, that ultimately peer pressure will result in less grandstanding. And, you know, frankly, in our own profession, as lawyers, we found that in those areas where there's been televised proceedings of public inquiries and so on, that there may be some initial grandstanding, but it dissipates in time.
For sure. And you have to give the public credit. They've been exposed now to open proceedings in Parliament, in all kinds of public inquiries and hearings, and they can smell out grandstanding.
But there must be times when it's more appropriate to be in camera or away from the public eye. What kind of situations do you see that would be appropriate?
Well, that happens when there's a compelling interest that outweighs the usual rule of open meetings. And they're very rare circumstances, but it's something, for example, when you're talking about a contract where the other side knows what your discussions are, they're at an advantage. Or where you're giving your lawyer advice about what to do in a lawsuit, and the other side should know what your lawyer is advising you. It's those kinds of situations that you would close the meeting.
So do you need to record why you're closing a meeting, or can you just decide that there's something private that you can close a meeting for?
Well, some care has to be taken to provide a justification for closing the meeting. That's, after all, part of transparency and showing that you're accountable. But as Richard will explain, you need to be fairly circumspect about how you justify proceeding in camera, that is, in closed session.
For sure. If you have a debate about why the session should be closed, you will destroy the very reason of closing the hearing in the first place, or the meeting in the first place, because it will all be revealed. So you need to explain why, but not make it into a full debate.
So how does the concept of confidentiality fit into both open and in-camera meetings?
Well, I'd make 2 points about that. The first one is that we need to recognize confidentiality where appropriate, but that we can't use confidentiality as a means of converting what would have been open meetings into closed meetings. The second point is that confidentiality, if it applies to the meeting, also should apply to the substance of what's discussed at the meeting, so that individual board members have a responsibility to be circumspect about what they say took place during those closed sessions. They shouldn't breach confidentiality by telling others what took place.
And I think we should differentiate between the concepts of confidentiality and speaking with one voice. Confidentiality means that until the board meeting starts, it is kept secret, and that if the board meeting is open, then confidentiality is gone. That is open to the public. The public can know about that. However, as a board member, you cannot be using your disagreement on an issue and justify it simply on the basis that it was an open hearing. You have to speak with one voice as a board member, fulfilling your fiduciary duty to the board.
So does that mean that once the decision's been made, you have to support it?
Well, in my view, that's part of speaking with one voice. You may have chosen to call for a recorded vote in order that your disagreement could be registered then, but you would be failing to live up to your obligations as a member of the board if you then set out to undermine the board's decision. Richard, what do you think?
You have the full right to debate and disagree during the discussion. You have a full right to vote against it. You have a full right to have your disagreement noted in the vote. But once the vote is made, that's the decision of the organization, and you as a board member have to support it. You have two choices: resign or support it.
So when you say support it, am I allowed to state any kind of reservation about it?
Well, not really. You indicate that this was the decision that was made by the board, and you're a member of the board. As a member of the board, you support the decisions that were made by the board. So you can't circumvent that principle by sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I didn't really support this. That people will know if they want to what your position was, and you don't have to say, I personally support this. What you have to say is, this is the board's decision, I'm a member of the board, I support the board.
What can a board member do if they really believe that the decision that's been made by the board as a whole is contrary to their basic belief system?
Well, in that situation, if it really is a matter of conscience, then it would be appropriate for the board member to resign. But those situations are going to be very rare.
I agree. Once you've been selected, you have a duty to finish your term. Only in a very rare case where it is a fundamental point of principle would you resign over it.
Now, the other question is, if a decision is made and it is contrary to the way I believe, can I end up getting sued for that?
Well, in Canadian law, board members are protected even in the event of a wrong decision, provided they've acted in good faith. If they've acted in good faith, they shouldn't be fearful of doing their jobs. And there are various means by which board members can be satisfied that they can continue to do their jobs in a conscientious way without fear of being sued.
I agree. I think it's a fair question to ask, but it is overblown. That it is very rare for a regulatory body or their board members to be sued. It's even rarer for those actions to succeed. And I've never heard of a situation where someone was held accountable for a board decision that they had voted against. In addition, almost all colleges have insurance coverage and indemnification protections for their board members for any action taken in good faith.
Now, you talk about good faith. Can you explain that a little bit?
I think what it entails is turning your mind to the real issues in the case, not being affected by any sort of external force or ulterior motive, and then making a conscientious decision, which involves really participating in the decision-making of the board in a proper way.
An example of bad faith would be deliberately breaching confidentiality, knowing, or you ought to have known, that this information was confidential. Another example would be making a decision to help a personal friend rather than to serve the public interest.
So as long as your intentions are honorable, so to speak, you should be okay.
I think that's fair, yes.
It's not about being correct or incorrect, but it's how you make the decision. Is that a good characterization of it?
It is.
Yes, I agree.